So, shalom, hi to everybody. Welcome to this G'ruzli즘 event called Self-Promotion. Tonight we have the pleasure of hearing Amital Stern's going to read for us, and also Joe Gellman's going to go over some strategies for digital media. And for those who don't know, G'ruzli즘 is an initiative to foster a local literary community, and we're just trying to connect people around their love for reading and writing. And we have a lot of stuff going on this month. We're really excited. So this is just one of the events that's going to happen in February. Next week we have another. We're going to be going to studio of her own. Whoever knows it, there's going to be two poets coming in from Tel Aviv.
40 Al-Malech Street.
40.
The public shelter, מקלט הציבורי ב-Al-Malech 40.
It's hard to get to, so it's good to keep saying
No,
that
no,
to everybody.
I think it's
No.
Studio Mishalach. If you put it in ways that will get
A
them.
lot of people have been
No.
telling me it's hard to get to.
No.
Okay.
It's exactly one traffic light after Tzomet Pad. It's got parking, free parking. It's very easy to get to.
So easy to get to, but for some reason people get confused.
Park
You
near
heard
the
it
sports
yourself
centre.
now.
Park by the sports centre and then
Because
just walk
it's
in.
on
So-
Golem Street. It's on Golem on the inner roadway toward the tennis center.
Okay, so now everybody knows where to go. It's going to be two poets coming from Tel Aviv, really exciting stuff. Also, the week after that, we're actually going to have one of the first of a series of free poetry workshops in a poetry place, Makom Shiraf, whoever knows it, and also another reading in the Shuk with a bunch of poets, and that's just even a few of the things. For some reason, February, a lot of stuff's happening for us, and we have some stuff going on in March. If anyone's interested in checking that out, we have a Facebook page, and also there's a sign-up sheet for our mailing list. We'll pass that around afterwards. For tonight's event, I really want to thank Artist Studios,
Perfect.
and everybody whom I talked to, Lihi and Amos and Tal and Ayelet, and I didn't meet you, but you're going to be.
That's Tal.
Oh, that's Tal.
She's Tal.
What's up, Tal? Thanks so much. It's a beautiful space, and like everyone sees, it's kind of amazing to see something like this happening in Jerusalem's industrial zone. Otherwise, I definitely wanted to say thanks to Moshe Lapin. He helped with almost everything that's going on here and the other events. And especially, she couldn't make it out tonight, but Geula Gertz did this really nice interview of Amital, which went up on Tumblr, if whoever wants to see it. And it's just connected to her work, and also we're going to hear a little bit of tonight. And then tonight's theme is promotion. So we all know about promotion. One time or another in our lives, we have to talk about ourselves, and then I'm assuming everybody here is involved in creative projects where we have to kind of promote the works that we do. And thinking about tonight's event and some other, like the context of literature, I just wanted to say that like people probably know that American literature can be, or American poetry comes from two kind of traditions. There's the Dickinson and the Whitman as poetic traditions, and I kind of wanted to suggest for tonight that we can also think of those two traditions as also different modes of promoting oneself, and that even the two people that are going to be talking tonight are kind of representative of each of those modes. So Whitman I'll mention later, but first Emily Dickinson, if people don't know about her. Dickinson was known for being reclusive, but she did correspond with a number of editors and other writers, and she was publishing even though she's known for kind of being locked in her house all the time. So she was hanging out alone, but she clearly was connected in this way to the people at the top of publishing, I think. And with that in mind, I think that Amital walks in that same vein. Whoever got to read that interview with Geula, you could see that Amital actually, I don't know how long ago it was, but she actually deleted her Facebook account. And that's one of the things that you can imagine everyone expects you to have. And
It's like locking yourself in the house.
It's like locking yourself in the house, but at the same time, if you poke around online, you'll see that she also has stuff coming out in some very nice publications, and her plays are getting produced, so she is making stuff happen without that, and it's really nice to have that contrast tonight, and to see that there aren't really, we all know what we're supposed to do, but then there's also people breaking those rules, and everything's fair game, so everyone should try different stuff. So with that, also, with the idea of promotion, Amital is running a workshop, so we wanted to promote that next week. It's actually only for women, but it's about, it's called Experiments in Writing Sex, and it's for any women that want to join. The workshop is an invitation to approach writing sex as entering unknown territory, leaving behind expectations and allowing for new language and form to emerge. If anyone is interested in participating, you can talk to Nadia here. She's the one helping run it through Writespace. And with that, let's just invite Amital to read. Amital Stern works in Jerusalem, writes theater, film, and more. She has produced a number of plays, and her prose work has recently appeared in English in Guernica magazine and also a column called Mifletzet. Everybody, let's welcome Amital.
Thank you, Anya. So yeah, it's the first time I've left my house today, so I'm quite reclusive. I actually am going to make a little bit of a mess right now because I really debated what to read tonight because I write in different forms and I kind of felt that reading prose doesn't work for me to read out loud, and I debated between, I'm going to do like a choose your own adventure, like you guys are going to have to decide, like either I'm going to read 2 prose poems, which are fine, and I can read them, or we can do a reading of my next column, which is going to be published next week, and it's a scene, which means I need audience participation, and it's a little bit controversial. And that's kind of my hesitation about reading it, because I'm always scared to read things in Jerusalem that have to do with Jerusalem and about Jerusalem in a controversial way, so I always have a lot of fear about that. So I'm a little bit hesitant about it, and I wanted to just see what you guys are interested in.
How about we do like 1 or 2?
What do you want to
Like option 1,
okay.
option 2.
Cool.
And then
So one is the prose poems, and 2 is the scene.
Ooh, the scene. Controversial.
Okay, great.
We're an adventurous crowd.
So it means that I need volunteers, okay? So I need 1 male volunteer. And
How long are you raising your hand?
Fine. 1 male volunteer. Okay, any men?
I'm not a male.
Any men?
You're being up there.
You're not a male.
I'm volunteer.
No way.
Okay,
I always
bring
thought I
your
was,
chair.
but I'm not.
Yeah, bring your chairs when you come, okay?
Founder of Jerusalem.
1 woman volunteer. Anyone?
I'll let the guests. I work here. I got you from
Nadia?
yeah.
And then 2 others, either men or a man or a woman. So it could be 2 women, if the men are too scared. Anyone?
אני לא אסתר.
אני
לא אסתר, אם עוד אנשים יוצאים.
You know what? I'm not going to do it.
I can be one of them.
There you go. Shivan here.
Stealing your chair. It's going to be easier than getting
אני
mine.
לא התחלתי לך.
Lame.
אבל רגע, בואי נתנה אחורה.
So I've been writing this column called Mifletzet, and it's about monsters and women in Jerusalem, language and place and body. So I brought the 4th column that's going to be published next week. The roots of this piece began a few years ago when I was working on a play that was set in the 1960s, and the character uses the word kus to describe her vagina. This play was part of a festival, and 2 women in their late 50s who were artistic advisors to the festival told me that in the 60s they never used that word, kus. When I asked them what word they did use, they were struck dumb. The best they could come up with was it or that thing. So then I became curious about when that word, which is in Arabic, became part of the Hebrew language. Along with this, a couple of weeks ago, there was a report in the Haaretz newspaper about tapes revealed from the 1990s, where you can hear guys from Jewish religious organizations offering prostitutes to Palestinians in exchange for houses in East Jerusalem. I found it interesting, this interchangeability between a woman's body and a house. I began to think about different ways women's bodies are referred to as houses, and about different forms of prostitution, both today and in the Bible. So this piece doesn't refer specifically to a mifletzet overtly, but you're free to decide for yourselves who he or she is. Maybe she's me, because I wrote this. Okay. So, you're the male chorus, female chorus. I'm going to give you to be the narrator, like to read the stage directions and stuff. And you're a disembodied kiss.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Okay.
So, okay, so you can start. The name of the play is Until You Don't Know. A testimony with chorus. You could be the character.
In response to a recent report in the Haaretz newspaper about tapes discovered from the 1990s that reveal how religious right-wing groups use prostitutes as a coercion tactic to acquire Palestinian property in East Jerusalem. Characters: Kus, a 40-year-old woman. A disembodied hiss, female chorus, male chorus.
You want a girl? 1, 2? How many do you want? How old do you want?
Enter Kus, stage left. She looks like a vagina, or a gate, or a city.
Here, yes, this is exactly where it happened.
Lights up on the female chorus. They look like a Jerusalem alleyway.
Dirty deal.
Or it might have been that alley over there. In the dark, they all look the same, don't they? I can't give you my real name for obvious reasons. Just call me Kus.
Lights up on the male chorus. They look like pieces of garbage strewn in the alleyway.
What a vulgar thing to say.
Kus means vagina in Arabic.
Nasty cunt.
They drove me only part way, then they told me to walk. Listen to this. I was wearing heels, stupidly. They told me to wear them. How could a man possibly know what it's like to walk in heels on wet streets of ancient stone?
The word kus penetrated Hebrew slang in the late 70s. Maybe it had something to do with the occupation.
Why does it always have to be about the occupation?
Until the late 70s, we didn't know what to call our thing.
So what did you call it?
We called it, not sure, maybe we called it that thing.
They were chunky black heels. Hey, it was the 90s. I was hobbling like this, grasping the slippery stone walls. The whole alley stunk of garbage. Can you smell it? Or it might have been that one over there. I heard a rustling sound. Something furry touched my foot. I slipped and fell to my knees, like this. I must have sprained my ankle because I couldn't get up. I turned to look back at the car, but they were already gone.
Dirty pimps
They weren't pimps. They were rabbis.
who hired a prostitute.
All in a day's work.
I see the way you look at me. Nobody wants me now. But 20 years ago, they used to hiss at me from the alleyways.
Kusit.
Kusit is an expression deriving from the word kus. It's synecdoche that connotes an entire woman through her sexual organs.
Don't get your panties in a wad. Kusit is a compliment. You could be a kusit too, if you tried.
Thank you.
I was never beautiful, even when I was young. Write that down for your records. But I was full of hope that radiated from me.
Easy target.
And I wanted to do good in the world. I believed in people.
Doomed.
You could smell it on me. Write that down. And there I was, on my knees in the garbage, in the rain, in the dark, alone. Tights torn at the knee in the shape of a twisted heart. Ankle throbbing. The man in the car had said good luck to me before they drove off. His eyes were overcooked meat, warm and tough like my father's, who I hadn't spoken to in many years. And so my father was somehow there with me that night in the alley, when I scraped myself off the stones, limped across the road in my chunky heels, down the winding steps like they had instructed me, knocked on the door 3 times like this, "Are you getting this all down?" And I could barely see the man who opened the door. He was so full of shame he wouldn't even turn on the light. The only words he said were kus and Viagra. Did I stink like the piles of garbage that I'd fallen into in the alley? He wouldn't even let me go freshen up in the bathroom. He was in a hurry because of the pills. I'd seen it all before.
Kus is a location on or in a woman's body.
Kus oozes like this,
Ooh, ooh, ooh.
or however you want her to ooze.
How many do you want?
Kus has an opening in its center. Oh, kus. Can you see it? Kaf, vav, samach. A hole like a gate.
You can come inside it like a city.
You can come inside it like a word that you've borrowed from another language.
You can come inside it like a house that you bought.
Or stolen.
You can come inside it like a...
So you want to know what made that night stick out for me from all other nights? Write this down. Before we pulled up into this alley, the man with the meaty eyes said this to me. "I'm not supposed to tell you this, sweetie, but you're saving the Jewish people tonight, just like Queen Esther." And the other man, the one who was driving, said, "She has no idea who Queen Esther is." And I didn't tell those men in the car that, yeah, I actually know the Bible pretty well. In fact, I didn't say anything the whole ride over because I was told to pretend I don't really know Hebrew. They'd asked for a non-Jewish girl because it made them feel less shitty about themselves, so I was told. But I could pass for anything, more or less, in the dark, if you weren't looking too closely. And what did it matter, Jewish, non-Jewish? All they really needed was a
Who's?
So I was told. And so that night, in the dim apartment, after I was prodded towards a small couch, a bottle of arak was thrust at me. On a normal night, I could down half a bottle myself, no joke, like mineral water. And before too long, the numbness would cloak my body, shielding it from feeling everything else. Fingers, skin, meat, knives. But that night, because of what the man had said about Queen Esther in the car, no matter how much I drank, I couldn't drown out a certain image in my mind. The memory of my father and brothers every year at our family Purim feast, getting drunk like you're supposed to after reading Esther's story in the Megillah, about how she saved the Jews by sleeping with King Achashverosh. On Purim you're supposed to drink ad lo yada, until you don't know anymore, until you can't tell the difference between the good guys and the bad guys in your own story. It was all in good fun, their drunkenness, and I could feel them there with me that night, my fathers and brothers, celebrating in oblivion, singing and dancing around the couch, ad lo yada, ad lo yada, ad lo yada, as the man climbed on top of me. Fingers, skin, meat, knives. No matter how much I drank, I couldn't drown out their joy.
The men and female chorus begin dancing joyfully around, of course.
Look at me, I'm saving the Jewish people.
Men and female chorus singing.
Look at me, fingers, skin, meat, eyes.
Lights dim as the dance continues.
So whatever. So yeah, thanks so much, Amitam. Very interesting. I have to participate too. So we'll move on to the next phase. And I mentioned earlier about the two roots of American poetry, Emily Dickinson, Walt Whitman, and now we're moving on to Walt Whitman. And for those who maybe don't know, anyone who reads Walt Whitman's poetry, you can tell that it was written in this style where you just like imagine him reading it to his friends and maybe even just strangers out anywhere. And people also, it's just known that Whitman actually wrote under different names reviews, his first positive reviews of his first book, which is now famous. At the time no one would read it. So you can just see that kind of drive for self-promotion that I think a lot of people expect today, especially with the internet. And with that in mind, I think that Joe maybe is not as zealous as Whitman was, but in that same tradition. And he's going to, show us some tips about how to leverage the internet and digital media for ourselves. And since Joe is here, he's usually out in the crowd. He comes to a lot of the Jeruzalism events, and I just want to also thank him for all the work he's been doing for us. I think if anybody sees what's going on online for us, the whole level of professionalism has raised up from what seems like little things like a logo, and then even just a lot of questions about identity and why we're doing what we're doing. Joe has definitely brought us to like a whole new level, so thank you for that, Joe. And now we're also thankful that he was the one who really wanted to come and just share some of these strategies with everybody. So I hope everybody enjoys. And Joe is a digital communications specialist, currently serving Jeruzalism's head of marketing. Prior to making Aliyah, he consulted to companies across the United States and lectured at General Assembly and NYU's postgraduate programs. Joseph is a prolific writer with national publications and global brands. Everybody give it up for Joe.
Thank you, Principal Amital, for the controversial but thought-provoking performance, and for everyone else who participated. Lonnie, thank you. And thank you to the Archive. This is a beautiful space, and I'm really happy to be here and kind of sharing this with you all. And as some people noticed as they came in when I had the title of the lecture up, selfless promotion is a bit of a contradiction in terms, and I intentionally made it that way because doing the kind of promotion that being an artist and getting exposure entails you have to walk this line between being outwardly promotional and, it's a crowded world out there, especially in this age of self-publishing and where anyone can kind of set up a little digital storefront or stall on this giant open-air bazaar we call the internet. But you also have to be, at the end of the day, fundamentally generous about your approach, because really, that's what art is. Art is the ultimate generosity. It's just creating with no real reciprocity entailed. You have to give of yourself and hope that you can resonate and respond with people. And so, especially in the age where the internet has become more and more commercialized, this is tough. And it doesn't make it any easier the fact that the tools online have frankly become pretty complicated. There has been an explosion of different social media outlets. If you look back as early as 2006 or 2007, Facebook was just a little glimmer in Mark Zuckerberg's eye. It was back in the days of MySpace. There was still a lot of buzz online, but in the past 10 or 15 years, everything online has come to a head in a way that can feel overwhelming for people who want to just get the word out in a way that doesn't require an entire marketing team and a Fortune 500 budget. Luckily, complicated tools can still be understood through relatively simple goals, and you can try to carve away all of the details that might get confusing or cluttering and get right to the essence of what you'd like to do. So today I want to go over that. So the first thing is to figure out just one singular goal for why you want to be online. And this can line up with your goals as an artist. And everyone is doing art for some reason, whether it's a confessional kind of thing where you just need to get something off of your chest and illustrate that with your work, or whether you would like to promote an individual project or work or show. Try and figure out the one thing you're attempting to do and have that be sort of your North Star. It's very tempting to get sort of overwhelmed by all of the options and all the different buttons and things you can click and miss the forest for the trees, where you really do need to keep that one thing in mind and pretty much ignore everything else until you get a handle on your core strategy. So once you have that, then you can understand your tools and form strategy. So instead of working the other way around where you just see all the options and then try and sort of muddle your way through, start with the goal first, then look at all the options, all the ways you can move different pieces, and try and build a strategy that way. Okay, so understanding social media at the highest possible level, I think we all kind of use it, and if we don't, then we still are at least somewhat aware of how people see it, how people interact with social media. It's pretty controversial. It leads some people to want to just get off entirely, other people to sort of begrudgingly accept that this is the way you need to do things, but still take it as almost something on top of their art and not thoroughly folded in. I worked in the corporate world for a long time, and one thing I'd always tell my clients is that social media is not this. I don't know if anyone's ever had the unique displeasure of going to a trade show or a convention where you start talking to someone and they're not even people, they're just their jobs and the things that they do, and there's no faster way to kill a conversation. Like, hi, I'm Joe, this is my job. Like, what do you do? Like, it's dead in the water, and we always would tell our clients that they can't operate that way on social media and expect to get any kind of response. They have to almost take themselves out of the equation and acknowledge the other person and to produce things of value on their own and not just be promotional. Luckily, artists tend to do that pretty naturally on their own. And one thing I've noticed is an issue that sometimes artists have is that they look at social media and this kind of marketing as something separate from their work and something they have to approach with a sort of business mindset. Like I do my work and it's on this side, and then I promote it, and suddenly I need to put on the suit and get the word out in a professional kind of way. I think that's doing it totally the wrong way. You should approach it more like a cocktail party, where you're just trying to share something that interests you, something interesting you're putting out into the world, and try to connect with people on an individual one-on-one basis. And so this is the golden rule for social media. In my mind, it's, especially for artists, don't make it about you, make it about what you make. That there's a subtle difference there, but it means everything. I think that especially if your art is coming from a really authentic place, just communicating what it is you're doing, the message you're trying to get across, and the final end product that you have is going to be intrinsically interesting to the right people. And you're not going to win over everyone. I think that another kind of misstep people make is that they want a broad audience. You want to do a J.K. Rowling, or, you know, where you go from being on food stamps and, you know, living on the street or from couch to couch, and then have a $1 billion franchise overnight. Sadly, that's not the way things are anymore. I think the world is just way too crowded because of the things I mentioned before. And especially, it's not something realistic you want to set your goals on. You want to start relatively smaller and trust that there's enough people out there that you'll find a niche, you'll find a group of people that understand your work for what it is and that resonate with it, and you can work from there. So, your work is what makes you unique. Every artist is coming from a different point of view, and so what you should do on social media is not try and promote, not try, like in the beginning, you should just either emphasize, enhance, or elaborate upon your work. You have to really try and connect with people, and you should only do one of 5 things. I thought about this for a while and tried to distill it down to 5 goals you should have. You should either, or you could do multiple ones of these, you should expand your audience, right? You know, grow the amount of people who could see your work. Better connect with your existing audience, which is, it doesn't seem to have as immediate of dividends because you don't see those, I call them vanity metrics, you know, where how many likes and followers and subscribers and views you have. Those don't tend to mean the same things for everyone, especially if you're not doing, you know, broad mass market advertising. It's much better to have a small but devoted group of fans than a large disinterested group of people. Connect with other creators. This is something that, you know, I can see that the Art Cube is doing very well, and at other galleries I've noticed around, especially starting with Lonnie and G'ruzlisim, you see the value that can come from having a space of collaboration and of connection where, you know, you have this cross-pollination of ideas, you get inspired yourself, you bring in audiences of each other, especially if you're doing similar work. This is something that social media, it's underutilized immensely. People go rogue into the self-promotional world and tend to, you know, okay, this is my thing, this is what I need to promote, and miss the fact that there's so many other people like them doing similar things. And artists, especially artists that are starting off small, are completely open to collaborate for those reasons, and also the fact that it's enjoyable. Adding value and context to your work. So I'll show you a few examples of this, but you see a lot of artists on social media not necessarily promoting their big book or promoting their next big show, but just giving a sense of where their head's at in terms of their inspiration, or giving a look into the behind-the-scenes process. All of this is uniquely, especially things like Instagram and other visual media, are great for this. It's amazing to kind of peek behind the curtain to see that much, you know, mythologized creative process that artists can have, and especially if people are really big fans of your work and want to understand where you're coming from, this can give them a nice little reward for the reciprocity of being their fan. And the last is, providing insight into your creative process. Those two are connected. Okay, so in terms of platforms, this is by no means an exhaustive list, and some of these names are going to seem very obvious and commonplace to some people. Some people are looking up here like, what are all these funny, techy sounding words? I don't know any of them. This is just a list for your reference, and I'll put a link to this presentation on the G'ruzlisim Facebook page, which you should all like. There's a little bit of selfless promotion. So artists have things like Even Art, which was just bought by an Israeli company, Wix, which is pretty cool. Behance, Dribble if you're a graphic designer, and Artsy is also one of my ex-students. She actually worked for Artsy, and it's great if you have a little more gallery traction. They really offer a great little encyclopedia of exhibiting artists. And then for authors, I think it's like Medium, which is sort of a social networking site devoted to the written word. It's a spin-off of one of the Twitter founders. You have Goodreads, which is kind of a hub for people's books, and I can go through this list, but you could just consult on your own. Okay, so choosing the right channel. There are no single right channels out there. Anyone who suggests that they know the right channel for you really doesn't have enough information to make that call. But what you can do is try and match up that original singular goal and see if that platform looks and feels like what you want to get across. Okay, so to choose a channel, articulate your goal, make sure it's very, very clear, right? Don't just have a vague idea in your head about what you want your goal to be. Really put it down on a piece of paper, make sure it's about 1 sentence long, and you can tell it to someone, they instantly understand what you're doing, even if they have no idea what your work is about. Know your options, so refer to that last slide, do some research of your own, see what channels are out there. Mind your medium, so if you're a visual artist, you don't want to go on medium.com, because that's mostly for words. Vice versa for Instagram. Again, you know, like Pablo Picasso said, learn the rules like professionals so you can break them like an artist. But for the most part, the medium should fit. Emulate relevant artists. Artists you're fans of, you know, people you're friends with. Try and see what they're doing that's really working. And another Pablo Picasso is good artists imitate, great artists steal. It'd be really funny if you didn't say that, but and then start now, start small, and experiment. It's the last thing. Really, you should probably have started yesterday, but don't beat yourself up about it. Again, this is a personal choice. You don't need to do this in order to connect, but if you want to start, don't plan endlessly. Try and just do something small, see it through, and then see how you do. Okay, start, only choose one channel. Again, some people try and just broadcast themselves out everywhere. No one will care if you're not there. They will care if you're there and you don't commit. I can't tell you how many companies I've consulted with that had all of these sort of social media graveyards. Nothing looks worse than some old, long forgotten blog that there's one post from 2011, and you know, I always remind of this quote: if you don't have time to do it right, when will you have time to do it over? Definitely keep that in mind. Okay, part number 2 of this is actually formulating a strategy once you have thought these questions through. Okay, once you've chosen a channel, this is the tough part because you're already spending so much time creating, but you either need to create new content to share on social media, and content is sort of like the buzzy, techie word for, you know, anything that you could produce artistically. So whether it's the written word or an image or poetry, it's just stuff. And either craft new content specifically for your social, or tailor new content to kind of fit. You'll see very quickly if you spend any time on the site, you'll see what the best content looks like. And if your content doesn't fit that exactly, then it's good to sort of take what you have and mold it. And I'll give you some examples. So sadly for the people who use the written word, people on social media tend to have pretty small attention spans, and graphics are going to do better in pretty much all cases. But luckily there are ways around this. So for example, if you're a poet, and this is something that people do often, is just handwrite your poem on a piece of graphic paper, put it on a pretty background, and you're done. And you know, you can see this here. Someone, you know, maybe had a little more graphic design chops. These things do incredibly well, and it's still sharing your poem. It's not really adulterating the work, just adding a little bit of flair to it, so it fits the general expectation for the channel. In this case, Instagram. Make it personal. Social media is still, at the end of the day, something that people use also for their own personal use, and using it in that way and connecting as an individual and as an artist can really help bridge the gap of people not actually being able to see your work in person and not being able to meet you. And being authentic can go a long way, and making effort to inject some personality can really get people interested in what you do. So Neil Gaiman has a Tumblr that's almost specifically suited towards posting just his everyday musings and adventures and kind of keeping up the mystique of him. I don't know if any are your fans, but for any fans, he's kind of a weird, eclectic guy, and his Tumblr, which is a weird, eclectic social media platform, really mirrors that. Then you got Butch Hartman. I don't know if anyone here knows Fairly Odd Parents, or he's an animator, but he draws cartoons of himself, he draws cartoons of his fans, and he literally draws people in by drawing himself, which is just a nice little thing. He's using the medium to really express a personal connection with his audience. And I don't know if anyone here knows the author John Green. John Green was a published author, but he wasn't a global phenomenon until he started this YouTube channel with his brother, where he connected people with him and his brother in their relationship on a personal level, and then had the books almost as an aside, like, oh, I also happen to do this, and people ate it up, and now he's one of Time's top 100 most influential people, and he's been making hit books and movies for years now. Connect with other artists. focusing on your audience alone can be limiting, but if you reach out to other artists, you can actually give yourself a better image and also bring people to new artists, learn from other artists. This guy is an animator on YouTube. He might not look, like the most professional, but he has, I think, 15 million YouTube subscribers, and he has a global reach. He's about 20 years old, this guy. And he, for the longest time, he has constantly given other artists shout-outs, people who have like 5 followers on their YouTube page. If they send him a sketch, he'll be like, go check out this channel, it's great. Or he'll do collaborations with people smaller than him, and makes very clear that he wants to pay it forward. And that kind of karma can really bring an audience in and make you seem more relatable and human and gracious. Another thing is when people reach out to you and give you nice things or do overtly nice gestures, just to your fans that are fans of your artwork, send out some kind of appreciation in a post. It's not very hard to do. It's the right thing to do, and people will really connect with that. Okay, experiment constantly. Again, there's no hard and fast rules for any of this. So the one thing you can do is start small and constantly check results. So you really are not going to know right away. The only way you can figure any of this out is if you pay attention to what your followers say, maybe ask them for advice, and tailor what you're doing to what is going to resonate most. And stay consistent. This is kind of tying back to if you don't have time to do it right, when are you going to have time to do it over? If you're not ready to dedicate the time and energy, then maybe it's best to shelve it or wait until you can really devote yourself to it. Because if you can't do it, it's just become a frustrating thing, and that's the last thing. Make sure you have fun doing it, because your audience will be able to tell. It'll come off as inauthentic if you can't get that enthusiasm across. If it feels like a chore, if you feel overly businessy, you're going to come off like the guy at the trade show and not like the person at the cocktail party, the person you want to be, the artist that you know you are, and it'll actually be enjoyable once you get the hang of it. So thank you, and any questions I'll take. And yes.
Say you've got a personal Facebook profile. Is it better to have like a fan page, business page as well, or like what would you advise for that?
Okay, so this is a very common question, and it's a little bit complicated, especially because Facebook is constantly changing the way they value individual posts over professional posts. There are a few benefits to having a professional business page. On the one hand, you don't get your personal life wrapped up in your art life. Again, that might be something you want to do, especially speaking to some of these points. But also, you can't promote events on a personal page the same way you can with others. There are certain limitations. You lose some of the ability to see how people are interacting with your posts. There are a lot of ways, especially when it comes to experimenting once you get larger, you can really get a granular sense of how you're doing and how people are responding. You can't buy ads and promote on your own page if that's something you ever want to do in the future. And it's tough to transition once you start. I think there's a certain friend limit you have also, but once you start investing in your own personal page as your art page, then it's very tough to pivot later on if you do scale. So all those things, but on the other hand, Facebook does value personal posts over business posts. They're trying to extort business owners to pay their advertising fees. So it's something you need to balance, and there's been volumes written on this that could actually point you in the right direction if you want.
If you do have, let's say, both personal and business, should you avoid like double posting the same thing?
Some people say yes, some people say no. I don't see any downside to reposting your own things, other than sometimes if you're the only one that reposts it, it looks a little bit like, it's just like you're in an empty room, like, come see me. But I don't see anything wrong with it. Like, they're not going to penalize you, I don't think. I'd have to look into that because they're constantly changing the rules. It's Mark Zuckerberg's way of being evil about it. Great question, though.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, I was confused why my art posts, let's say on my artist page, don't go automatically to my personal page, or vice versa. I have to repost it.
Yeah, Facebook treats in a business page as a completely different entity.
And then it's double.
Yeah, so that's a similar question. of whether you want to use both, whether you want to use one. If you're starting out, especially if you're building a tight-knit following, sometimes it can be better to get off the ground with your own personal page. And then when you see some real interest being drummed up, you can say, oh, I just made this brand new page.
Go to my page.
Exactly. So that's something, it's a judgment call sometimes, and you can look and see what other people you admire have done. That's probably the best way to do it. But it's certainly a good question. Any other questions about maybe some other sites or platforms or? Yeah.
Instagram.
Instagram.
I keep getting messages, convert to a business profile.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard like different things for and against. I was wondering what you think about that.
This is a similar thing. So, for those of you who don't know, Facebook owns Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the dirty tricks that one is doing are mirrored in the other. And they're rolling out business pages. Business pages give you a lot of the same options that you had. And also give you a lot of the same drawbacks. It becomes tougher to get your posts. So there's something called an organic reach, where it's just you put out a post and a certain percentage of your fans or followers see it. Your organic reach on your personal page is going to be much higher than an organic reach on a business page. That's because they can make you pay to reach all of your followers, which you got anyway and which are yours, but that's how they get you to spend money. So again, it's a similar push and pull of, if you want to pivot later, I think that for now they're pretty lenient on converting a personal page to a business page, but that used to be the case on Facebook pages, converting personal pages on Facebook to business pages, and then they nixed it. So you never know what they're going to do, and you're kind of at their mercy. It's a good question, though. Any other questions, or? Yes?
Somebody suggested to me that you should have a website that you can link to from your Facebook.
Yes.
Yes.
Doing that, so the first thing, just owning all of your content, all of your stuff, is very important because, like I was mentioning before, these big social media companies, and I don't mean to hate on Facebook, but it's so easy, they're very capricious with how they change their policies, and you never want to have an entire body of work, especially if you're creating new content for Facebook. You could have a whole body of work that they just pull the rug out from underneath, and you don't have full rights to it, or they have rights to it. There was a case where they were using photos for other people's work for promotional emails without your permission, because in that giant long contract, you scroll to the bottom and sign, you signed away your rights to your work. So having a place where all of your content is owned is just good practice. And also Facebook values outside content more, just links. It'll generate, like when you post in a link to Facebook, it'll generate a rich post with like a preview of the page, an image, and people tend to click more on that. Like I said, graphics do better than text, and so there are a whole host of benefits to it. And luckily, you don't need to learn to code anymore, really. There are so many great plug-and-play website builders like Squarespace or Wix or Weebly that...
Can you say those names again, please?
Sure. Squarespace. They pick funny names. Wix.
That's our site.
And Weebly.
Weebly?
Yeah, who knows? That's all I need to say.
Weebly's probably a helpful.
Yeah, it sounds like a kid site. Any other questions? No? Okay, if anyone has a site they'd like me to look at. What?
Yeah, you want to do an example?
Sure, if anyone wants to brave being on the big screen.
Yeah.
Yeah?
But
Okay.
I'm embarrassed I haven't updated it for a while, but let's see. It's www.judithappleton.com.
And do you have any social media accounts associated with it?
I just have a Facebook page, a personal, and an artist page.
Okay. Let's see. This looks nice to me. I would say updating it is probably the most important thing. And then the next thing is, you know, if people Google your name, I don't know how many other people have the name Judith Appleton.
A lot of people.
A lot of people.
Yeah.
So then gaming the search engine for that is very difficult. So posting to your Facebook might be a better way to get people to it, and then linking them back to your Facebook as well. So I see your bookmark is your Facebook, which I don't know if that is best practice.
I added a Hebrew name to Facebook so that it would differentiate me.
Well, that if people are searching your name in Hebrew, that's a great idea. I just it's hard to tell if people would be doing that.
I changed it to Judith Yehudit Appleton.
January 30th is pretty recent. And how did you get the word out about your page? Did you tell you, like you said, you have a personal page and?
On the personal page I wrote, I have a new entry to my blog or my website, check it out. I'm in a show, I'm in this and that.
I'd say that like the curve of returns, especially when you're first starting out, can feel very, it's called like a shallow curve where you're just going and you're not rising all that much. This is where consistency is absolutely key. Because you just need to be doing the right things, but doing them often enough. And, you know, in a place like this, I'll remember you with Appleton, I'll go like your page. But just try and keep consistent with it and then experiment with different things. So if you're doing the same thing all the time and you're not seeing as much of a pull-in as you'd like.
I'm saying zero action on my weekly analysis is zero.
So in that case, you might want to get the initial bit of traction like a snowball, you know, where if there's nothing, it's not going to gather any additional momentum. So maybe pay to boost a page. I don't know how much I can recommend that. And if not, another thing you might try and do is utilize another platform, right? I went through all those other platforms that you might want to explore. And then the last thing is to interact with other people, interact with other artists, and try and be as gregarious and outgoing as you can, especially for those of us who are shy. The internet can be a nice little veil of secrecy, and you can still be outgoing in a way that you might not feel comfortable with in a physical context, you know, in real life, as the kids are calling it. I'd say just try different things and experiment and keep at it.
Sorry, on that point, I was a friend who's a digital marketer, and they said you've got 18 minutes on Facebook to get a like or something, otherwise they don't, other people will not see it. So when you are going to post, if you have other friends who can at least like it, so it doesn't just die down.
אני עושה לייק להכל, אני זונת לייק.
So if you tell a couple of
זמן מסוים שצריכה להתחיל לקבל לייקים, אם לא זה עולה פחות בפיד.
I'm not sure if the 18 minutes is a hard and fast rule, but it is because different people will check their feeds at different times, so there's a whole internal logic to how Facebook's newsfeed pushes out content. But it is smart to try and, you know, if you can kind of get someone in there to help you out, that can go a long way, and recency is valued in posts. But other times it's just because Facebook is cutting off your post because you're not paying. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So you can use different platforms if you want, or you can pay to boost in the beginning and then get some traction. Any other questions or things to look at?
What do you think about the website of like Wix?
Wix is a perfectly
or
good.
other
Yeah.
similar websites?
There are a few. Wix is pretty good. It's a little steeper of a learning curve than something like Squarespace or WordPress is another one where it's very much plug and play. They'll have entire templated sites for you. Wix does have that, but it gives you a little more creative latitude. But the payoff, like the trade-off for that is that it's also a little less intuitive. But all of them are good options. They're all relatively cheap, hovering around $10 to $20 a month. Some are completely free. And having a website, especially nowadays, is almost a must. It's sort of like, having a phone number.
But does it look like less professional if it's Wix and you're not buying like your name?
It might look marginally less professional, but people most of the time don't notice or don't really care. Having a custom domain is something that is a little more important. When you don't spend money for Wix, not only do they put the little badge on your site, they also make you have it at www. So that isn't good for your search engine results, and that might not look as professional. So you have to weigh it. If you're first starting off and you want to just play with the tool, then I'd say don't buy it right away. Get a sense of which interface and which process is right for you. But then when you do see something you like, don't hesitate to make the investment. Yeah?
I use a platform called Format for for visual artists.
Yeah.
I find it really, it's cheap and it's pretty good.
Yeah, Format's a newer one, but I've heard good things about it.
Yeah.
It's good for if you have a portfolio or
Yeah.
you have something that's very highly visual work.
Yeah. I pay like $7 a month.
Wow.
And that's including the space and everything.
And the domain name?
Domain name
You have to buy separate.
yeah, but that's like $20 a year.
Okay, so unless there are any other questions, thank you all for listening. You can come up to me personally and ask any other questions, and thank you for listening.